All right, well, we're good to go. Oh, how do you introduce yourself?
My name is Angelica. I am a international speaker and 14-time best-selling author.
What motivated you to kind of tell your story on my podcast?
Well, I've been through a lot, and part of the reason that I keep going and part of the reason that I want to be successful is to show other people who've been through bad things that they can make success happen, that those things don't have to stop them.
Okay, I'm just kind of an influencer.
Yeah, kind of, sort of.
Let's start with the interview if you're ready.
All right, sure.
Okay. First, you said when you were growing up you had some abuse. Was it from your family, or could you walk me through that?
Yes. See, this is are you does the parts where I say get cut out, right? So I keep saying it's not gonna.
No, it's fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so my mom and my dad are both amazing people, but there was a point in time where my mom was going through things and things weren't so great at the house, and that was very hard to deal with. And then in the future, I ended up in an abusive relationship with a guy who turns out is actually diagnosed as a sociopath. So that was a really wild one. But yeah, so I've just had a good amount of things throughout the years, and it hasn't been just one thing. It's been kind of every once in a while I just get a little slap in the face.
How old were you when it happened? Like, what time period was it?
I think middle school is when things started getting rough. And then I would say, they were actually still pretty rough when I was in college. So things kind of started getting bad around middle school. And, even in college, things weren't too great. And even after college, things weren't too great. It's so I've been through a lot of different situations.
So basically, you were just a child, kind of just, it was normal for your life in a sense.
Yeah, in a way, the chaos became, what is normal. I know for a lot of people who grow up in, more chaotic environments, then, later in life, they actually seek out that chaos in partners. And that's some of the, part of the reason that people who have, a little bit of a chaotic childhood can end up in, these abusive relationships, because love, the love, is a little bit more chaotic.
Did you think it was like you said, yes, it was normal, with the actual normal? Did you know it wasn't whatever people experience in their day-to-day life?
That's a good question. So yes and no. To me, I could still recognize that there were things that were happening to me that weren't normal, but the extent of it, I didn't realize wasn't normal. The amount of traumas I've endured are a little more than the average person goes through.
Could you walk me through your day-to-day life throughout, middle school through college, if you could?
Yeah, so middle school was pretty messy. I mean, growing up was pretty rough. There was a lot of different things. I had been through abuse. My family members kept dying. My mom almost died from alcoholism. Right after that, Scott almost died from alcoholism, who I'll touch on later. So I would say during high school is when I was struggling the most. Extremely depressed to the point I was sleeping most of the day. And I don't mean 12 hours. I don't mean 13. I mean 18 hours, 20 hours. Oh. Yeah, so I was basically hibernating because of everything I was going through. I couldn't deal with it. And I actually ended up missing over 400 days of school. And this isn't counting weekends. This is actual school days. I missed over a year's worth of school because I could not get out of bed. So high school was going through a lot in that period of time. And, near the end of high school is when I met this guy. He was really sweet at the time, and we ended up, reconnecting again later. And he ended up, just kind of getting really abusive, to the point where, it was physical. He had choked me. He took my phone, put it in the toilet, broke my phone, shoved it down my throat, that kind of thing. So it was really hard. It really messed me up. But I'd say the thing that messed me up the most was because, after all of these individual traumas, somebody moved in named Scott. And Scott was kind of like a second dad to me. Honestly, I think that, I was doing so bad at the time that I don't know if I would be here if, Scott didn't move in. He just he was a very good guy, and he was struggling with some mental issues one day. Well, in general, he was struggling sometimes. Just one day he wasn't doing very well. He kind of had a breakdown, and I thought, I didn't know what to do, so I thought, okay, let's call 911. That's what you're supposed to call when it's an emergency and you need help. So the police ended up coming, and one of the first things they asked me was, are there any hostages in there? And I'm like, no hostages. It's just one person in there. It is just Scott. They ended up shooting him. He went back inside the house, and he just started to bleed out. And it was hours before they even went in to check on him. They left him bleeding out for hours. The reason that they said they did this was because there were hostages, or they weren't sure if there were hostages, even though that's the first thing we told them was that it was just Scott in there. So they let him bleed out. He ended up dying, which messed me up because we called you guys to help and you just shot him and let him bleed out and die. We lived down the street from a fire station with an ambulance. So that should not have happened. It was a very bad situation. So on top of that, I ended up speaking on a news station. And that somehow pissed off most of the cops in the county. So there was a point in time where most of the police officers around just didn't like me. I even had my doctor, her husband was a police officer, and because of what happened, she didn't want to be my doctor anymore.
You mentioned when we were on the phone that you're battling PTSD. Is that kind of where you think kind of started?
No, so I know for a fact that's not where it started. I think, when I was younger and the traumas I had experienced, they had messed with me. And then it'd been a little time and I'd experienced more things like abuse, sexual assault. And, that kind of adds into the bucket. And so, I was dealing with PTSD, but when the Scott thing happened, that is just what completely broke me. It was to the point where, for most of my life, for a long time until the end of 2021, I had nightmares every single night since middle school. And actually, after Scott was killed, I started sleepwalking, which it doesn't sound that bad, but it was to the point where I was taking ADHD stimulants in my sleep and I didn't even know it. And to the point where I would wake up and my medicine would just be gone. The PTSD was really hard. There was a lot of things I could not do. There were a lot of things that I would just break down. Dissociation was a big one for me. Even now, it's something I still deal with. But for me, dissociating and detaching was the way that it's what I had to do at the time to survive. Because in that house, as well as Scott being killed, I was also sexually assaulted in that house. And that's actually how I got into one of my first relationships, which is never a good way to get into a relationship. Everything that happened made me very confused. And that person kind of used that confusion to, suggest that we should try a relationship. And me not understanding what happened and what I was feeling, I said yes. And then that was just kind of the stepping stone to get into worse relationships down the line.
Maybe I forgot to ask in the beginning, but how old are you currently? Just so I can kind of get the time frame, of the whole story.
Yeah, so I'm currently 26. When Scott died, I was around 23.
Oh,
he was there for my 21st birthday. I'm not sure about the 22nd. It's weird because when that event happened, I completely lost any concept of time. It could be a few months, it could be a year, and in my mind, it was the same thing. I was not able to conceptualize time.
It just all kind of blended together.
Yeah, 100% just kind of blended in together.
Your childhood, basically being, excuse me for my language, a shit show. How did you kind of cope with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start with one that I recognize is not a healthy coping mechanism, but it's something that at the time I kind of had to do to survive, and it was sleep. I just hibernated. I just slept most of the day. I'd wake up, maybe go on the couch to go back to sleep. Every once in a while I'd wake up just to go sleep somewhere else. That was one of my biggest coping mechanisms for a very long time, but it's not healthy. So actually, I started to realize as I came into the personal development world that as you talk about your traumas, it gets easier. So when, PTSD is basically your brain reliving the event it thinks that it is in that event. So when you talk about it, it's very hard at the beginning. But by talking about it, you show the brain, hey, I'm safe. Like we're talking about this, but like we're safe and we're not in danger. And over time, that helps to lessen the PTSD response. So talking about it has been very helpful. And, it's not easy, but it's something that, you take one step at a time. And the more that you share what you've been through, you just talk about it, like it takes some of the weight off of you. And it shows your brain, like, you're safe, like you're not going through this.
Would you say you missed a lot of your childhood while sleeping, pretty much?
Yeah. I wouldn't say my childhood, maybe my like fun years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I slept a lot. I mean, like it's honestly a lot of it's a blur and it's kind of weird because you don't realize how much time you are like kind of wasting until like one day it hits you and you're like, like wow, like all of this time passed and I wasn't even here for it. So it's a really weird feeling. And then that is another part of the reason where I'm like, need to buckle down and get going.
Was there any turning points that you would say during your trauma healing?
Yes, so I'd say after Scott, I was difficult. Like in addition to the sleepwalking, apparently when my roommate Morley, he would try to wake me up, I would physically attack him. And this is something that I do not remember at all. Like I was not conscious. Like I swear I woke up, my soul, my consciousness did not wake up. And I was like attacking him and I had no idea until he told me. And I was just being, I wasn't doing good. I was doing really bad and I started to notice the effect that I was having on the people around me. And that really hurt. To see the people you love are being hurt by you, that's not a good feeling. So between that and, realizing how much time I've slept and, wanting to make Scott proud, it was a mix of that, kind of like was a turning point where it's like, I'm not treating the people in my life well. Like I need to change. Like I have not been doing good because of all of these things. Like something needs to change. For me, one of the things that brings me joy is helping other people, giving, being there for them. So of course it hurts when you're having a negative effect on people. So I really wanted to put in the work to change that. Actually, just coincidentally, COVID happened. And that gave me a lot of time to just buckle down and focus on just becoming better, healing my trauma and becoming better, not only for me, but, for the people around me.
You said you like helping people. Have you ever done any, like, just a general question, have you ever done anything like that, like working at like a homeless shelter or anything?
Yeah, so I mean, I've worked in homeless shelters, I've done soup kitchens, I've helped build things. Actually, part-time I work for a nonprofit called Second Chance. And then, the other smaller things, like you get chances to help people every once in a while. I take those too. Like once in a while, there's someone on the side of the road and they're hungry. Just bring some food. Like it doesn't have to be a big thing. Like you can just help here and there. I think it's like the ripple effect. Every good thing you put into the world, it spreads ripples. And maybe you can't see them, but those ripples are out there doing more good things.
To anyone out there going through any abuse, doesn't matter what kind, is there any advice you would like to give to them?
Well, I mean, most importantly, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You can't blame yourself for this. It's not fair to you. And I know it's hard to get out of. Find a support system. Like I'd say having a good support system is really going to make the difference. It's going to help empower you, give you the strength to get out of that abusive situation. And for people who can't, like for example, if you're under 18, that's a very hard situation. The best advice I can give you is, like I said, support, find places outside of your house where you can go spend most of your time. Let's kind of think of like other advice. I mean, and if you're like under 18 and you're stuck in an abusive environment, that won't last
Yeah.
forever, you know? It's hard. You just have to hold out until you become older. And if it's something where your parents are abusive to you, just remember that, you know, it's okay to cut off people. I know that, you know, I've seen it before where people talk about how they cut off their parent because their parent was abusive, and people respond saying, but they're your parent. They love you. Like you owe them something. But if they have hurt you, you do not owe them. Like you do not have to let them be in your life. It's okay to put up boundaries to protect yourself. And I just want to say that also, you know, if that is something you're going through, this is just a reminder that you are loved and you have value and you have worth.
You said that you don't want to talk a lot about your mom, like, because she's still alive. But do you mind if we talk just a little bit? Like, you said that she's the one person who was like fully good to you.
I mean, I'd say that both of my parents have been great to me, but just there was a point where she was struggling and it, you know, ended up affecting me negatively.
How does your relationship to this day with them, if they're still?
I'd say it's a lot better. You know, when you're younger, you don't understand that your parents are doing the best with what they have and what they know. And, you know, maybe that's not always going to be what's best for a kid, but, you know, what matters is that you love that kid and you're trying. Yes, like I love both of my parents and they have been wonderful to me, but like there's just been some times in the past where, you know, things have gotten a little chaotic. There was a point in time where I was living in this house, and the person I was living with was struggling with alcoholism. And, you know, it's a disease in a way. Like it really messes with you, even when you're not drinking. Like it's a depressant. So not only does it going to mess with you, but it's going to depress you. It's going to make things harder for you. And, you know, when I was living in this house, there were a lot of times I was just kicked out of the house without shoes. Like on Christmas, out of the house, no shoes, it's raining, my feet hurt. I'd say one of the worst times in, you know, living at that house with that roommate, were just throwing my stuff outside. They got really drunk and they were just throwing my stuff outside. So, you know, it's my stuff. Obviously, I'm going to go outside to get it. And me just going onto the porch, I don't think I need to bring shoes or a phone, but I walk out there, I lock the door, and they don't let me back in. So there wasn't like I couldn't get back in. So I had to, and I didn't have shoes either or my phone. So I had to walk. I walked to one friend's house. They didn't answer. Walked to another friend's house. They didn't answer. Walked back to that one person's house. They didn't answer. You know, I spent a lot of time just walking on the street. And I also, you know, I tried to get like the people who were driving by, like, hey, like, can you help me out? Like, call somebody for me. And I probably looked crazy, so no one stopped. I got to the fire station, knocked on the door, no one was there to help me. And then I went into the parking lot of like the shopping center, and there were these two very kind people. It was a man and a woman. They were in a relationship, and they were also just kicked out of the house. And God bless this lady. She gave me her shoes because I had been walking for hours without shoes, and she gave me her shoes. So yeah, well, you know, at the beginning of the story, it does show that, you know, sometimes people do bad things, but, you know, there's also people who do good things. So that was people that gave me the shoes, and they helped me get to a grocery store. And the man in the grocery store, he had no problem with me sleeping in the grocery store if I needed to. Yeah, he was someone I'd never met, but he had my back. And, you know, that's really nice. Like, it's a really nice reminder that there are people that are out there, even if they don't know who you are, they still care. And they still want to help. But I would say that living in that house with that roommate was very difficult.
How old did you see her? Because I didn't hear.
Honestly, it just kind of goes back to that I don't really have a concept of time. I have no idea how old I was. No idea. Yeah, I don't know.
How are these memories that, like, from what we talked about, everything kind of together, how did they, like, made the concept of you, like, how are they made you who you are today?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say that all of those bad situations taught me a lot of kindness. You know, we never know what somebody else is going through. A lot of people go through things and they hide it so well. And that's why it's so important that no matter, who we run into, we treat them with kindness, that we give them our best. Some of the things I learned was persistence, to keep going, just to keep going, because you never know when you're going to get where you want to go. And if you give up, you'll never get there. But I would say one of the biggest things is kindness. Going through all of that and, seeing how bad people can be makes me want to be the complete opposite. And I don't ever want to let people doing bad things or mean things or negative things to me change how I treat other people. I know it can be hard, that there's a lot of people who've gotten jaded because they've tried to be kind and they get taken advantage of. But I have made it a point to never let anybody taking my kindness for granted. Never gonna let them influence me to treat other people not as good. I will always treat people with kindness. I think that's so important. And then also just being there for people, making sure that the people in your life have support.
Going back, going back to boyfriend, if you don't mind, could we go back to that topic for a few questions? I was wondering, how was what was the police and the community's reaction to that? Like after the shooting and everything, like what was the reaction from people?
So the reaction from most of the community was very kind. I got a lot of friends who I hadn't even talked to in a while, reaching out and, saying nice things. But like I said, there are some people who are police who were very offended by what I said. And I feel like that also says a lot, that, somebody that I loved was killed. And not even just that you shot him, but that you let him bleed out for hours and didn't do anything. And I decided to speak up about that because that shouldn't happen. And that people were mad at me for speaking up and saying, hey, people shouldn't get killed. And that's really weird. I mean, like I said, even my doctor didn't want to be my doctor anymore because her husband was a police officer. And I don't have anything against people who are police officers. I just have, problems with injustice. And I think that, I don't think it would be fair just to blame the person who shot him. I don't think that of course, yes, that's a problem. But, the biggest problem was everyone's reaction. When he was shot, I tried to run and go to him. The police officer was about to tase me for that. I was going to get tased because I was trying to run to help somebody who was bleeding out. And this is even weirder. They even stole my hat. Which isn't as bad, obviously, but I just got a new hat, got home and I put it right on the table. They took my hat. It's just a lot of it's just really messed up. I mean, and I don't think it was fair for police officers to dislike me just because I spoke out.
How would you say it? How would you say it affected you and your family?
It kind of broke us, at a point in time. He was our family. My mom was very distraught. I wasn't doing well because I was the one who called. I saw what happened, but this was her boyfriend. This was the person she loved, and it really messed her up. So I had plans to move out, and ended up, wanting to stay with her because she needed the support.
Everybody has their own way of honoring someone. How would you like to honor him? Do you go to a graveyard? What's your memorial?
So I actually have this little letter from him. I think I got it for my birthday, and it just says "create," and then has his initials. So he was really into art, and he was an amazing artist. And one of the ways I like to remember him is I just keep creating. Honestly, I get depressed. It happens, and that's okay. Yeah. You can't not be successful just because you're depressed. You can still find success. So I just want to be open with the fact that, yeah, I experienced depression, because I want people to know, even if they do experience depression, like, they can still become successful. Like, it does not have to stop them. And I'd say one of the biggest things is just to keep creating. It's like when I get depressed, sometimes I stop, or sometimes there's a lot in life that, kind of gets into my head and I'm not creating, but it's cathartic. It's so healthy and so, beautiful in a way, just to sit down and just create something, get your emotions out and just put something new into the world.
I think that's really nice, actually. I was kind of doing a little bit of research before the interview yesterday. I went over to your Facebook and I saw that you posted that you're an entrepreneur with like a clothing line. You're an author. Can you talk about a little bit of that?
Yes. So I am a 14-time best-selling author, and I'm in two series. One's the 13 Steps to Riches, based on Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. The other one is The Principles of David and Goliath. As far as the clothing line, that is not out yet, but it's going to be out soon. So that's really exciting. And then, I do a lot of speaking, and I'm currently working on actually like a course. But the thing is, it's not just a course, it's actually mainly a workbook. So I feel like there's a lot of courses, they give out good information, but, we have to put in the work if we want a difference. So I've been just working on creating this entire workbook so people can really break down setting goals, because having those goals set, understanding them, is going to make a massive difference in your ability to be motivated and be disciplined. If you don't know what you want to do, you don't know your goals, it's harder to get up. It's like, what's the point of getting up if there's nothing I want to accomplish? I just lay in bed. So overall, in my books and, my speeches, one of the biggest things is make success happen. We don't wait for success. We don't give up. Like, we're going to keep going until we can make it happen. I really like to provide actionable tips, so things you can actually do something with. And then I also really like to include psychology, because I think when we understand ourselves better, then we can do more to work with ourselves instead of against ourselves. So I'd say, yeah, making success happen, mental health and trauma are really important. And then also making happiness, creating happiness in your life. I think, what's the point of being successful if you're not happy enough to enjoy it? I'd say those are some of the most important things I like to talk about.
So stay consistent with your life.
Yeah, consistency is key. I will say, though, I have ADHD, so consistency can be something I struggle with. But, like I said, like, we have to keep trying until we get to where we want to go. If we give up, we're never going to get there.
I meant to say this a little bit earlier, but would you say kids are in the story?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to having kids. I would love to give a child a great life, but I want to make sure that I am in a position where I can give my kid everything. I can give them the absolute best, because I think it would be selfish of me to do otherwise. And I'm also considering adopting. There's so many kids out there that deserve to be loved. Every kid deserves a parent. Maybe not every parent deserves a kid, but every kid deserves a parent. And there's so many kids out there that deserve good homes, So I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's really nice. And before you go, I'd like to say it was really nice meeting you. You seem like a great person. Thanks for coming on my show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, and before you go, I have this thing for every guest where you get to shout out 10 seconds of a company, a website. You get the gist. Like, is there anything you want to shout out?
Yes. Well, first of all, Angelica.world, join the newsletter. Second thing, The Science of Getting Rich is a movie. It's coming out very soon. Trailer's on YouTube.
It was great meeting you again. I hope maybe I'll have you again in maybe a year or two. Who knows? Yeah.
Any feedback?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did a great job. Come back on August 7th for the next episode of Tired Granolla Bar Podcast. If you're interested, subscribe on my Spotify and YouTube, whatever you're watching it on. And I hope you like this and all of my other episodes. Have a good day.